All right, so we are going to go over the warm-up assignment questions for the week of September 21st and 24th. So, as you can see, I've already organized the items into the correct levels of organization, but I want to give you the explanation of why those are the correct answers. So, starting with cells, osteocytes. So, the root word site means cell, and osteo means bone. So, this word means bone cell. So, that is our cell level of organization. Tissues, we have blood. We know that blood is made up of a bunch of blood cells, red blood cells and white blood cells. And so our tissue are a bunch of cells that work together that perform a specific function. And in this case, blood is a tissue. Organs. So my organ, the definition of an organ is a group of tissues that work together to perform a job or a specific function. And so in this case, my bone and my leaf are my organs. My bone and leaf both have tissues that are made up of cells, and that makes them our organs. Our organ system, we have a root system. This one kind of gives it away just by the fact that it says it's a system already, but our root system is an example of an organ system in a plant. And last but not least, we have our ant. We all should know that an ant is an organism, but furthermore, an ant is an organism because it has the 5 levels of organization inside of it. So an ant has its organ systems. That's made up of organs, that's made up of tissues that are made up of cells. Since an ant is an animal, it's a multicellular organism. Number 2. So we're matching the following vocabulary to the correct definition. So we need to know the definition of a cell, tissue, organ system, and organism. So we know that a cell is the basic unit of structure and function. Tissues are just a group of cells that work together to perform a similar function. So that answer is a group of similar cells working together. Organs are just a bunch of tissues that work together that perform a specific function. Organ system is a group of organs that carry out important jobs. And then organisms, you could argue that the answer is just a bunch of organ systems that work together. But in this case, we know that organisms are a living thing. And so in order for it to be a living thing, it needs to possess all of those 7 characteristics of life. So this definition of an organism is an individual living thing that possesses all the characteristics of living things. Question 3. The picture below shows a plant structure. Which level of organization are included in the diagram? So when I'm looking at this picture, I see individual, what looks like cells to me. And in those cells, I can tell they have a nucleus. And so if I'm looking at, so I know for sure if it's a cell, that's one level of organization. And if I know that multiple cells create a tissue that perform the same job, this is multiple cells, so that must be a tissue. So my 2 levels of organization that are included in this photo are cells and tissue. So the answer is B as in boy. D. So we're organizing the following from the smallest to the largest. The smallest level of organization should be on top. And so when I'm thinking about my 5 levels of organization, I'm thinking about the smallest unit of life. And if I'm thinking about my living organisms, I'm thinking, okay, so I have them all the way down from my smallest living being, my single-celled unicellular organisms being my bacteria, all the way up to my multi-billion-celled organisms being humans and animals. So if I'm thinking of my single-celled organisms and I can't even see a bacteria, that a cell must be the smallest unit of life. So at the very top should be our cells. So if I'm looking at our options, neuron, a group of neurons, brain, horse, and a nervous system, my neuron in this example is my example of a cell. And if I know the definition of a tissue, it's just a group of cells that work together. So a group of neurons, which I know a neuron is a cell, a group of neurons must be my tissue. Now, for my organ, so we have a brain, a horse, and a nervous system. Well, a group of neurons is our tissue, and a bunch of brain tissues create our brain. So our brain is our organ. And so for the last 2, I have horse and nervous system. There it is again, that keyword system. So I'm thinking, oh, nervous system must be organ system. Oopsie. And then last but not least, I know horse is an organism. It has all those 5 levels of organization, and it possesses all those 7 characteristics of living things. So the order from smallest to largest would be neuron, group of neurons, brain, nervous system, horse. Number 5, which of the following shows an increase in complexity of the levels of organization in living things? So if it's getting more complex, so there's more components that go into making that function, whatever that be, an organ system, organism. So I'm trying to figure out what is my most simple level to my most complex. And if I'm thinking of my cells, they would be my least complex, because you could have one cell and that's it, and the organelles that go inside of it. Where an organism is made up of cells and tissues and organs and organ systems. So my organism is super complex. So if I'm showing an increase in complexity, I'm going to start with the least complex and go to the most complex. And so knowing my order of levels of organization, it should be answer B as in boy, cells. Multiple cells create tissue, multiple tissues create organs, multiple organs create organ systems, and those multiple organ systems all work together to create an organism. Number 6, fungus is found on a fallen log. The fungus is decomposing the log to provide energy to fuel its life processes. What characteristic of life is represented? So if I'm reading this question, okay, so I have my fungus, that's my organism, and what is it doing? It's decomposing, but why is it decomposing? It's to provide energy to fuel life processes. So we know my fungi is alive, and in order for it to be alive, it needs to get some source of energy. And so this to me screams that it needs to consume or create and use energy. So this fungus is decomposing that log because it is eating it to get its energy to fuel its cells to be able to survive. Number 7, while fishing, I accidentally fell in the water, scaring all the fish around me. So scaring all the fish around me. The fish swimming away from me represent what characteristic of life? So if I'm a fish, and if I fell in and it scared the fish around me and made all the fish swim away, I'm trying to think about does it have anything to do with reproduces? No, these fish doesn't mention anything about the fish having babies. Grow and develops. Doesn't mention anything about me falling in the water, making those fish grow super large and mature. Has levels of organization. Me falling in the water doesn't have anything to do with the amount of cells, tissues, organs, organ systems, and organisms that fish has. So that leaves us with sense and response to their environment. Well, if I fell in the water and I scared them and they responded by swimming away, that makes sense to me. So the answer to 7 would be D as in dog, senses in response to the environment. Now the last 3 questions, we have to use this levels of organization graphic organizer. So we're going to use this picture and answer questions 8, 9, and 10. So what letter represents the level of organization that a leaf, a stem, and a root belong to? So first I have to ask myself, well, what is a leaf, a stem, and a root? What level of organization would that fall in? And if I know that it's a leaf and a stem and a root, that is an organ, but it's an organ for a plant. So now I know that the level of organization that I'm looking for is organ. And so if I'm looking at this graphic organizer, I need to identify which level, what letter represents which level of organization. So if I'm thinking about the smallest component of life, I know that's my cell. And which circle is my smallest? That would be A. So A must be my cells. And if I'm thinking about which level of organization is my biggest, I know that's my organism. So I'm looking for the circle that's the largest, which is E. So if I know that the smallest is cells and the biggest is E, as I work my way up, I'm growing in complexity of my levels of organization. So A must be cells, B must be tissues, C must be organs, D must be organ system, and E must be organism. So if I know my leaf, stem, and root is an organ, and C represents organ, I would say that C represents the level of organization that a leaf, stem, and root belong to. So the answer for 8 is C. So question 9, what level of organization does letter A represent? Well, we just answered that. It is the smallest circle, and we know the smallest unit of life is a cell. So A represents our cell. So again, the answer is C, cell. And last but not least, which of the following are 2 examples that would be found in the level of organization represented by level D? So before we can answer that question, we have to determine what level of organization is represented by level D. So if we know that A is our cell and E is our organism, D must be our organ system, because A is our cells, B is our tissue, C is our organs, D is our organ systems. So since I know level D is my organ system, I need to look for 2 examples that are organ systems. So my first choice is A, root system and shoot system. Well, here's those keywords again, system. That indicates to me that this looks pretty right. A looks pretty good, but let's check the other answers. Blood and muscle tissue. So we know from previously blood is a tissue because it's multiple cells, and muscle tissue, well, it says right there that it's a tissue. So we are looking for organ system, so B is not correct. A neuron, we know that is a brain cell, and a red blood cell, there we go, it's a blood cell. This must be cell, that's represented by level A, so that's also not what we're looking for. And a leaf and a branch. A leaf and a branch, that's our organ, so that's represented by letter C. So it can't be that answer either. So that leaves us back to our original answer, A. So the answer to 10 is A, our root system and shoot system.